Welcome to the online lectures for software engineering. In today's class, we'll be beginning with the topic requirement engineering. Now, the first thing we'll identify is what is requirement engineering. Now, this requirement engineering, it focuses on, it is a broad spectrum of the different tasks and the different techniques that is going to tell you how you're going to understand the requirements. Now, by whom are these requirements stated? These requirements are stated by the end user, the person for whom that you're developing the software. So different tasks and techniques that are used so that you understand the requirements. This process is called as requirement engineering. Now this requirement engineering, it is a major software engineering action. Requirement engineering is a major software engineering action. Now this requirement engineering, when are you going to start with the requirement engineering? Now within the previous unit we have studied the different phases while developing the software. You begin with the communication phase. So this requirement engineering, it begins at the communication phase. It begins at the communication phase and it is going to continue until the modeling phase. So within communication planning modeling, that is within the 3 steps you're going to follow is requirement engineering. Now this requirement engineering, it should be adaptable. That is, you need to be able to make changes according to the process that you're using for the project. What is the process that you're following within the project? What is the product that you're developing? And who are the people that are doing the work? So based upon these 3 things, your requirement engineering, it needs to be adaptable. So this is what is requirement engineering. Now the first topic within the requirement engineering is requirement engineering as a bridge to design and construction. Now the building the software, now whenever you're building the software, all the software developers building the software, it seems like a more fancy work. So the software developers, they want to directly jump into design the software. They want to start and build the software. Now they want to build the software before they have a clear understanding of what is being needed. They do not have a clear understanding of what the end user wants within the software. And the few justifications that they give are this particular software that they are developing, the understanding for the software they are going to understand as they are building the software. But building the software without having clear understanding of what you are developing, it is going to lead to a failed software project. So designing and building, it is challenging, creative, and just plain fun. It is challenging because if you do not know what are the different features that the end user wants within the software and you start beginning with building the software, then it becomes very challenging because it is going to lead you to a failed software project. This requirement engineering, it builds a bridge to design and construction. That is, if you gather all the requirements, if you have this requirement engineering activity, this requirement engineering activity, it is going to enable you, help you to design as well as construct the software. And it is also going to help the software team to examine the context of the software work. That is, what are the different features, functions that they want, or what is meant by the specific functionality that is going to be identified. What are the priorities within the software? What needs to be your priority while you're developing the software? And it is also going to tell you what is the order in which the work is to be completed. That is, what task is going to be completed first, which are the tasks that can be completed later. So this requirement engineering, it acts as a bridge to design and construction. Now within this requirement engineering, why this acts as the bridge to design and construction is that because when you identify all the different requirements within the software, you get to know what are the different functions that need to be there within the software, how the software needs to behave, what is the behavior, what is the different information that is required. This has a great impact on the resultant design. That is why requirement engineering is important and it acts as a bridge to design and construction. Moving on to the next slide, this requirement engineering. Now, within this, we have identified this requirement engineering. This is going to be followed from the communication phase till the modeling phase. That are three phases: communication, planning, and modeling. Now, what are the different tasks that you need to follow while you're gathering the requirements? So, the different tasks that the requirement within the requirement engineering that need to be followed are 7 tasks: inception, elicitation, elaboration, negotiation, specification, validation, and management. So these are the 7 tasks. Now we'll be studying all the 7 tasks in detail. Now the first task is inception. Now inception means it is the beginning task. What are you going to do at the beginning of the software project? That is called as your inception. The first phase is the inception. Within the inception, the first thing that now when within the previous classes we have identified, whenever you're developing a software, you're going to identify the different stakeholders. Now within the stakeholders, they can be different stakeholders. What are those stakeholders? It can be a business manager, he can be the marketing department, or he can be a product manager or the finance team, anything. So these are the different stakeholders. Here we have mentioned 3 different type of stakeholders. Now all of these different stakeholders, they have got their own requirements. The business manager, the marketing department, product manager, everyone have got their own set of requirements. So whenever you're designing the software, you're going to take everyone's point of view. So all the stakeholders, what they are going to do, they are going to identify the breadth and depth of the market. That is, you're going to identify whether building this particular software, how it is going to affect the market, how they are going to get benefit out of it. That is why you're going to identify the breadth and depth of the market. That is a rough feasibility analysis. By doing this, you can identify what is the project scope, how it is going to benefit the organization. This is going to be identified. So within the inception phase, all the stakeholders are identified, and these stakeholders, they do a feasibility analysis. Within this feasibility analysis, they identify the project scope. Now within this, at the project inception, you're going to ask a set of questions. Within the project inception, you're going to ask a set of context-free questions. Now, what is this context-free questions are going to focus on? They are going to focus upon what is the problem, that is why you're developing the software. The people who want the solution, that is who are the people that are going to use the software, that you will be identifying. Then the nature of the solution, that is how you're implementing this particular solution, that is going to be identified. Now, this entire inception, it is focusing upon the collaboration, that is how the end user and the developer are going to collaborate. That is how they are communicating, collaborating between the different stakeholders and the software team. That is identified. That is this within the inception phase, you're going to perform all the communication by asking a set of context-free questions so that you identify why we are developing the software, like casual conversation. Then the next phase is the elicitation phase. Now within this elicitation phase, what happens is that you're going to identify what are the different requirements. You're going to collect all different sort of requirements. Now all of the set of requirements, they can be captured by conducting interviews or by doing survey of the market, asking the software engineer to fill in the questionnaires. That is, within the questionnaire, you're going to have a paper. Within this paper, you're going to have a set of questions. For these set of questions, the user is going to answer a set of few questions. So by looking into the answers of these questions, you're going to identify what is that the end user wants. Then brainstorming. Now, what is brainstorming? Brainstorming means that for a specific problem, there is a specific problem. That is why you're developing the software, why the software is being developed. Now, why the software is being developed, you're going to identify a few problems that you need to address while you're developing the software. That is, these are the issues from the previous software. That is why we want the new software. So how you're going within this, when you identify the different problems, you're going to identify what is going to be the solution to the problem. So in here, not only one person is not going to give you the solution, whereas multiple people are going to give you that. You're going to have a team. Within this entire team, multiple individuals are going to be there. All of those individuals are going to give in their own set of ideas. So that is called as brainstorming. That is collecting ideas from multiple people so that you can identify how a solution needs to be implemented or how a problem needs to be solved. That is identified via brainstorming or by seeing a few observations. So within the elicitation phase, you're going to gather all different type of requirements by conducting interviews, surveys, questionnaires, brainstorming and observations. So this is how you're going to gather all the requirements. Then within the elicitation, there are a few problems that makes elicitation difficult. A few problems that is going to make elicitation difficult. So what are those problems? The first problem is called as the problem of scope. Now within this problem of scope, the customer can give some unnecessary details. Now unnecessary technical details that are not actually required. When you give a lot of unnecessary technical details, what it is going to do? It is going to confuse the developer of what needs to be developed. It is going to confuse the developer and it does not give you clarity of the system that needs to be developed. So that is called as the problem of scope. When you give on adding multiple unnecessary details, it is going to confuse and it does not provide clarity of the system that you're developing. The next one is the problem of scope. The problem of understanding. Now within this problem of understanding means that here you've got the customer. Now if suppose this customer, he does not have knowledge about the technical specifications, he does not have knowledge about the technicalities, he does not have any technical knowledge. So when he does not know the technical knowledge, if suppose the developer is going to ask how is the user interface you want, so a person that has got basic knowledge, he is going to tell what is a user interface is. He does not know what a graphical user interface is, that he does not know what are the advantages and the consequences of a computing environment. Why we're using this, he does not know what are the pros and cons. So when he does not know the pros and cons, it is going to be difficult for him to deliver what needs to be developed. What needs to be developed, he cannot give you, like he cannot provide you with the exact information what you're going to develop. The next one is called as the problem of volatility. Now what is the problem of volatility? The problem of volatility means that the requirements change from time to time. Not as if suppose while the meeting is being conducted, the end user, he is going to come and tell you that he wants some specific requirement, that he wants first, second, third requirements. Within the next meeting or by the evening, he's going to call you, I do not want first and second, I want something like 4, 5 and 1. Then again at night, he might tell you this got some different specification list. So when your requirements are not stable, it becomes difficult for you to identify the requirements and to go to the next phase. So that is the elicitation phase. There are three problems that are encountered within elicitation. That is the problem of scope, problem of understanding, and the problem of volatility. The next one is the elaboration phase. Now, what is the elaboration phase? Now, within this elaboration phase, the information that is obtained during the inception and elaboration is expanded. That is the first step and the second step. Within the first step, you've got information about the different stakeholders, their requirements, and you've asked a set of questions. Within the second phase, elicitation, you have conducted interviews, surveys, questionnaires. So all of this information, what you're going to do, you're going to take all this information that is collected from the first and the second step, and you're going to expand it. That is, you're going to add more detail to it. How you're going to accomplish a particular functionality, how you're going to accomplish a specific feature. That is called as elaboration. As the name says, that you're elaborating the different information that was obtained within the first and second phase of requirement engineering. Now, what is the end result of elaboration is called as the analysis model. Now, this analysis model is going to define the information that is going to be used within the software, the different functions, the behavior, and domain of the problem. This all information is gathered by the analysis model. Now, within this analysis model, you're going to identify all the different attributes of analysis model. What are the different attributes of the analysis class? These are defined. What are the different, like we have different objects. While you're developing the software, you're going to have different classes, so you're going to identify the different attributes of analysis class. Now, if we take the example, what are attributes? Within the previous class I've already discussed. Now, if suppose there is the class name person, his attributes is going to be the name, the ID, his contact information. This all can be your attributes. So for a particular class, you're going to identify the different attributes. The first task. Then within the second task, you're going to identify what are the services that are required by each of the class. Now, whenever you're designing the software, you're not going to have one class, you're going to have multiple classes. So for all those classes, you're going to identify the attributes and the services. Now, when we have the different classes, they are going to be the different relationships. What are relationships? Relationships means how each and every class connects. What are you going to identify the different relationships and how they are going to collaborate. The collaboration is going to be, collaboration means how they are going to communicate, how information is going to be transferred from one class to another. All of the things are identified. And apart from all those three, apart from those three steps, you're going to add, you're going to represent different diagrams. Different diagrams can be used so that you can elaborate this analysis model, adding all the attributes, the services, the different relationships. These all can be represented by making use of different types of diagrams. So that is the elaboration phase. The next phase is the negotiation phase. Now, within this negotiation phase, what happens is that whenever you've got the end user, you've got the developer. Now, this end user wants something more. That is, you've got fixed the price, you've fixed the cost. Within this cost, he's going to tell you that I want something more. Like the same way, when you're shopping something from a street vendor, you might negotiate with the prices. The same way, the end user is going to negotiate with the developer of the different functionalities or features that he wants within the same class. And it is usual for the customers to ask for anything that can be achieved within the specific cost, or something that is even beyond the cost. So it isn't unusual for the customers and users to ask for more that can be achieved. Given limited business resources, you can reconcile these conflicts through a process of negotiation. Now, what is going to happen within this negotiation process? Now, as you have identified, there are different stakeholders. What are the different stakeholders? You can have the customers, the different users, and the stakeholders. Within the stakeholders also, you're going to have different categories. Now, I've just given a broad aspect in here. Now, this customers, the users, and the stakeholders, they are asked to rank the requirements. Now, ranking the requirements means, now if suppose this particular project is going to have requirements as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. These are your requirements. Now, you're going ranking the requirements means giving priority. That is, which is the most important requirement that you want within the software. Suppose the 6th. Now, this is the requirement, and you're going to give the priority. So suppose sixth one has got the first priority, that is, this is the most important. This can be second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth. These are the priorities for the software. So when the customer wants of, now we'll assume that this within the set of requirements for the some specific cost you've identified. Oh, no, one second. You've got all six requirements. For all the six requirements, what you're going to do is you're going to give priorities. Now, when you're ranking the requirements, for each requirement, what you're going to do now, as there are different stakeholders, they might have different priorities. So you're going to discuss the conflicts within the priority. Now, within this, the end user might think that this fourth specific requirement, that is the priority is second, whereas a marketing department, he might think that the priority is 6 for this particular department, or for the requirement that is numbered as sixth requirement, the priority is 1, whereas priority 5 is marked as 1 by some different stakeholder. So you're going to identify what are the conflicts, and you're going to make a priority chart that is acceptable by the customer, users, and stakeholders. You're going to make a priority list that is accepted by all of the three. Now, when you have this priority list you're going to modify based upon the customer, user, and stakeholder, based upon their acceptability, based upon your conflicts. You're going to also identify what are the risks that are associated with each requirement and how much cost is going to be increased. Now, when you identify these three things are going to help you. Now, this is going to help you so that some specific additional requirement that were given by the end user, that is, if suppose there is also a seventh requirement, now this end user is going to tell you that he wants the seventh requirement. Now, within the seventh requirement, based upon that, if suppose this has also got the fourth priority, the requirement 3 and requirement 7, both of them have got the fourth priority. So based upon that, what you're going to do, what is more important to you, the 3 or the 7th one? You might do few of the things. You can combine this, that is, if suppose this requirements are similar, you might combine the requirements and make it one. You can modify it, or you can completely eliminate. That is, you can implement the seventh one and you might completely remove the fourth requirement. So you're going to combine, modify, and eliminate requirements so that all of these parties, the customer, user, and the stakeholder, they achieve some level of satisfaction. That is what happens within the negotiation phase. The end user, customers, stakeholders are asked to rank the requirements, the priorities. You're going to discuss the different conflicts within the priority. You're going to identify the risk and cost. Then based upon all the three things, you can combine, modify, or completely eliminate the requirements so that all the three people in here are satisfied. That is the negotiation phase. The fifth task is specification. Now, in the context of computer-based system, the term specification means different things to different people. Now, a specification, it can be a written document, it can be a graphical model, it can be a mathematical model, or it can be a collection of user scenarios. Now, user scenarios mean how the user is interacting with the system. This is also called as a use case diagram that we've discussed within the previous class, the collection of user scenarios, or it can be models. Those models are called as your prototype. So this is what a specification can be. It can be a written document, graphical model, mathematical model, user scenarios, prototype. Any of the thing can be called as a specification. Now, what a specification is? Specification, it is called as the final work product. A final work product. Now, this work product, it is produced by the requirement engineer. Requirement engineer that's going to produce this final work product. Now, within this specifications, you're going to have all the different functionalities. What is the performance of the software? what are the constraints. Each of the thing is listed within the final work product. Now, whenever you're developing a large system that is a complex one, a written document is majorly considered as a specification, or combining natural language description or graphical model, it can be used. Now, within this, you can either use any one of them, you can use any one, or you can use a combination of a few. Like in here, you're combining natural language and graphical models. So that is specification. The next one, now within this specification, there is a software requirement specification template. Now within the software requirement specification, we have discussed that it is a documentation. Whenever you've completed a mini project, you have every time made a documentation. Now this is called as your SRS, software requirement specification, where we discussed the example for hospital management system. Now how is this documentation is going to look like this entire overview. The table of content, you're going to have the introduction. Within the introduction, you can list the purpose, why you're developing the software, document conventions, intended audience, like for whom this particular software is, or how you are going to, what are the people that are the audience for your software, or some reading suggestions that can be given, the scope of the project, and references. That is, these references are going to be based upon your reading suggestions and document conventions, based upon that from where you've gathered information, or what more files can be read, so that you get a more clear knowledge of what the software is based upon. That is what is going to be given in the references. Then the second chapter can focus upon the overall description. That is, what is the product perspective, the different features, the different user classes, characteristics, operational environment, that is on which environment you're building the software, the design, the documentation, assumptions, dependencies. That is going to be the entire overall description. That is, basic description will be given with an overall description. Then the system features will be given. Then external interface. What are the external interface? Hardware interfaces, software interfaces, communication interface, user interface. This all are going to be added. That is what is, it is like a detail of what are the different task activities that you have done within the software. What are the different models that you have used. Everything you need to document within an SRS. Then you can have functional requirements and non-functional requirements that are also going to be mentioned. All of this is a description of SRS. That is what is going to be within a specification phase. This is designed within the fifth phase within the requirement engineering task. The next one is the validation phase. Now within this validation phase, this requirement validation, it examines the specification to ensure that all the software requirements that you've stated unambiguously. Now, all the requirement that is, when the end user has told that this is a set of requirements that you need to follow. So these set of requirements, they need to be stated unambiguously. Now, what does unambiguously means? That it does not have more than one interpretation. It should not have more than one interpretation. It should not have more than one meaning. That is going to be identified. Then the next one is, you're going to identify any inconsistencies within the software. Inconsistencies means the software it is not complete, or the software becomes unpredictable. Inconsistencies means unpredictable, or the software it is or incomplete. It is unpredictable or it is incomplete. Any omissions, that is any data that you have deleted, any errors that you have found, those all are detected and corrected. Validation phase focuses on all of these aspects. Now, the primary requirement validation mechanism is the technical review. That is, this validation can be done by conducting technical reviews. Now, what are technical reviews? Now, within the technical review, you're going to have the stakeholder. Now within this job of the stakeholder, he is going to examine all the specifications for your project. Now, as he examines all the specifications, he is going to look for errors. If any errors are there within the software, or if any areas are there that require more clarification. That is, some areas are confusing, or they might have more than one interpretation. So you are going to take clarification of this project. Then you're going to identify inconsistencies within the software. Then we also focus upon the different conflicting requirements, and if even there is any unrealistic requirement. Now, unrealistic requirements means the one that is not achievable. All of the things are seen by the stakeholder, and you're going to look over it so that you can validate the software, remove any types of errors, and all the errors need to be corrected. If there is any unrealistic requirement, they also need to be required. They need to be removed. Errors need to be removed. Areas that require more clarification, they need to be clarified, and changes need to be made within the software. And if there is any incompleteness, inconsistency within the software, you need to give complete data. So that is the validation. Now the next within the requirement checklist, we've got a set of questions that can be asked. Are requirements stated clearly, or they can be misinterpreted? That is, you're going to identify any unambiguities within the software. Is the requirement bounded in quantitative terms? That is identified. That is whether you can quantify all of your requirements. Now, what other requirements relate to this requirements? That is, if any other requirement is relatable to this requirement. Is there is any cross-reference? That is, one requirement is affecting other requirement, that will be identified. Does requirement violate any system domain constraint? That is, any constraints, if you have identified any constraints within the software, if any requirement is violating that constraint, that will be identified. Are all the requirements testable? Now all of your requirements need to be testable so that you identify whether they are working properly or not. This can be identified. Is the requirements traceable to any system model that has been created? That is all the requirements. Now whenever you're designing the software, you're going to create models. Now within the model, all the functions that you have embedded, this all should be traceable back to what the customer has told you within the requirement gathering phase. Whereas within the later phases, you're going to identify within the software that you have developed, whether all of this are traceable to your models. So all the models are going to have all the things that are captured by the end user. So all of the questions are going to be asked within the validation phase. The last step is the management. Requirement management is a set of activities that help the project team to identify, control, and track the requirements. So within the requirement management, you're going to perform a set of activities so that you can identify, control, and track the requirements. And if any changes are there within the software, all the changes, how they're going to be embedded. As the term says, you're going to manage all of the changes. Manage, identify, control, track, all of those things are going to be done at the management phase. Now once you identify all the requirements, you're going to develop traceability tables. Now these traceability tables are developed and they relate to requirements to one or more aspects. What are aspects? Aspects are your requirements. Now we'll discuss an example. Before that, I'll tell you what are the different traceability tables. So within the traceability tables, the first traceability table that you have is a feature traceability table. Now what this feature traceability table is, the feature traceability table, it is going to tell what are the different requirements that are related to the customer. What are the important ones, the important product features. This are going to be identified within the feature traceability table. Going to see how the requirements are related to the important customer system or the product. Then the next one is the source traceability table. Now the source traceability table, it is going to identify the source of each requirement. Now identifying the source of each requirement is in what place, like by making use of what that is by going through what scenario or what made you introduce the specific requirement within the software. Then the third one is dependency traceability table. Now this dependency traceability table, it is going to indicate how requirements are related to one another. It indicates that is making use of requirement 1, it is going to help tell you that requirement 2 is also necessary. Indicates how requirements are related to one another. So the feature traceability tables, it is going to tell you how requirements are related to the important customer system. That is what software you are developing, how this requirement is important. Within source, you're going to identify what made in the first place the addition of the specific requirement. Dependencies means how all of the requirements are related, that is going to identify. Then the next requirement is the subsystem traceability table. Now subsystem means, now for specific requirements you're going to have sub problems that you're going to split it into multiple categories. Within likewise within subsystem traceability table, you're going to categorize the requirements by the subsystem they govern. That is what features are present within what subsystem, you're going to categorize based upon that. That is, if suppose there is one main problem. For this main problem, you are splitting it into two sub-problems. There's sub-problem 1 and the next one is sub-problem 2. Now within the sub-problem, you can have different set of features. Features are different for different sub-problems. Now what are these sub-problems are your subsystem, that is a part of your system. This part is one part of the system. The another one, that is combining 1 and 2, is going to give you the entire feature. So you're going to categorize the different requirements. These features are your requirements. So this specific requirements 1, 2, 3, they fall into subsystem 1. That will be identified. Then this 4, 5, 6, they fall into subsystem 2. So you're going to categorize all the requirements based upon this. Then the last one is interface traceability table. Now within this interface traceability table, you're going to show how all the requirements are related. That is, all the internal and external interfaces are identified. Internal and external interface. How this external and interfaces are related, this is going to be identified, related based upon the requirement. So these are the 5 types of traceability tables that we have studied. One is feature traceability table, source traceability table, dependency traceability table, then subsystem traceability table, and interface traceability table. So based upon your requirement, you're going to make use of the specific traceability table. Now this is an example of the traceability table. Now these are the set of requirements, and R01 is your requirement 1. R02, 3, 4, 5, these are all your requirements. As mentioned here, these are your requirements. Whereas in, you're going to specify in here all the different aspects. What are aspects? Aspects are your different features, specific aspects of the system on that specific environment. These are going to go on till AII, whereas requirements are going to go till the nth number. So within this one specific requirement, it is going to fulfill which specific aspect you're going to make a mark on that. If suppose there are some requirements 6 and 7, if R02 is fulfilling 6, R04 is fulfilling 7, all of this are going to identify. Or one specific requirement, it can be one specific aspect, it can be fulfilled by some specific requirements. So this is going to be identified. You're going to make traceability tables whenever you've identified all the requirements. So we have completed the requirement engineering answer. This requirement engineering answer this is important for 7 marks and 10 marks. For 7 marks, it can ask you to identify and explain what are all the requirement engineering tasks. For 10 marks, it can tell you you need to mention all the requirement engineering tasks, and it can ask you to elaborate. He might ask you to elaborate the inception phase or the elaboration phase or validation phase. Any phase can be asked to elaborate. Now, whenever you're elaborating this phase, be sure that you at least write a few lines about all the other tasks, because it is a 10-mark answer. In detail, you can write down about inception and elaboration. Now, a quick recap for this requirement engineering answer. Now, this requirement engineering answer, it has what are the different requirement engineering tasks? There are 7 requirement engineering tasks. The first one is inception. Now, what is the inception phase? Inception phase, it is the first phase within the requirement engineering phase. Within the inception phase, first thing, you're going to identify all the stakeholders. And the job of the stakeholder is they are going to identify the breadth and depth of the market, so that these stakeholders can identify what is the scope of the project that you're developing. This is the first step within the inception phase. Within the second step, what you're going to do is you're asking a set of context-free questions. Now, this context-free questions, why are these asked? So that you identify what is the problem you identify the problem, then who are the people that are going to use the software, then you identify what is the nature of the problem. This is identified. And this inception phase, it focuses upon the communication and collaboration between the developers or the stakeholders and the different stakeholders, developers and stakeholders. So this is the first phase, that is the inception phase. First one. The next phase was elicitation phase. Within elicitation phase, what happened? Within the elicitation phase, you're going to identify all the requirements, and these requirements are gathered by either conducting interviews, surveys, asking them to answer a few questionnaires, brainstorming, or by making use of a few observations. Within this elicitation, we also identified 3 problems. What were the 3 problems? The 3 problems were the problem of scope, where the user is giving more and more information about technicalities that is not going to give you clarity of the software. Then the next one was the problem of understanding. Now, this problem of understanding, where the end user does not have proper knowledge about the different technical features, about the different prospects, and what are the different capabilities or the limitations. He does not know the different capabilities and limitations for specific technology. Now, when he does not know the capabilities and limitations of the software, he cannot completely understand what needs to be developed or how he is going to deliver, or how he's going to speak the requirements, or he might just omit obvious, the ones that are obvious requirements, he might omit them, what he thinks as obvious, what he thinks is obvious, that is going to omit. Then within this, the third problem was problem of volatility. That is when your requirements are changing from time to time. Then the next phase that we've studied was elaboration. Now within elaboration, what we've seen, third phase, within elaboration, all the information that was collected at inception and elicitation, you're going to elaborate all of this information. Now within elaboration phase, you're going to develop an analysis model. That is the end product of elaboration is analysis model. Now within this analysis model, you're going to identify what are the different classes, what are the classes you're going to identify, what are the relationships of each class you're going to identify, how these classes are going to collaborate. You're going to identify what are the different functions, the behavior, each and everything is elaborate. That is, you're adding the level of abstraction, giving more detail. You're adding more detail in here. Also the services. That is the third phase. Now after the third phase, the fourth phase was negotiation. Now what happened within the negotiation phase, where the customer is going to ask for something within that same cost, or asking for more than that can be achieved. Asks for more than that can be achieved. Now when the customer is asking for something more, he'll be asked, all the customers, users, stakeholders, they will be asked to rank the requirements. You're going to rank all the requirements. Now as different people are ranking, you're going to identify the conflicts in their priorities. Then you're going to estimate the risk and cost of each requirement. Now when you've got a priority order, you've sorted those priorities, you're going to estimate what is the risk that is associated with each of the requirement, what is the cost associated. Based upon that, you can eliminate, combine, or remove some requirements so that all stakeholders achieve some level of satisfaction. That is the negotiation phase. Then after negotiation, you had another phase, that is your specification. Now within the specification phase, now specifications mean different thing to different people, that it can be a written document, it can be a graphical or mathematical model, prototypes. Now within the specifications, what you're going to develop? You're going to develop the software requirement specification, the template that we've discussed, the introduction, the features, technical requirements, non-technical requirements, all of the things are going to be identified within the different specification. For large projects, you're going to make use of this written document. Then the sixth phase is validation. Within the validation phase, you're going to identify if any unambiguities, if suppose any requirements are stated unambiguously, that is, they've got different interpretations. If any inconsistencies are there within the data, that is, the data is not complete. If any errors are there, that is also going to be identified. Any errors, all of the things are going to be removed. Now validation means you're like identifying each of the requirements that was stated by the customer. All of them are present and all of them are accurately present within the software. All of the things are going to be identified within the validation phase. Then the seventh and the last phase was management. Now this management phase, within this management phase, this was required so that you are going to implement a few activities so that this can going to help you identify, control and track all the requirements. All the requirements and changes within the software. Now once all requirements are identified, what are going to be developed? All requirements are identified, you're going to develop traceability tables. Traceability tables will be developed. Now within this traceability tables, we have discussed there are five different types of traceability tables. It was a feature traceability table, source traceability table, subsystem traceability table, interface traceability table, and dependency traceability tables. Based upon this, you can make use of any traceability tables based upon your requirement. Now these traceability tables are maintained as part of the requirement database. All of these traceability tables, they are maintained as part of your database. That is, all which requirements is going to fulfill what aspects you're going to identify, and these are stored so that you can identify the different aspects and the requirements that are supporting. So this is the very, very, very important answer for 7 to 10 marks. Now within many question papers from the second unit, you can find that this question is frequently asked. This is the end of the class. Thank you.